Spring has sprung and it's time to get your spring preparedness game kicked up into high gear. Hey, this is episode 778 of the Ready Your Future podcast, where I connect you with resources that will help you prepare for a better future. It's all about loving your people, getting prepared, and living free. I'm Todd Sepulveda, a regular guy living in the suburbs who understands the need to be better prepared for the future. Hey, are you looking to up your preparedness knowledge? Don't spend time bouncing around the internet for the best preparedness content. Instead, sign up for the top preparedness articles and get them right in your email. For $5 a month, you can get the top preparedness articles from around the internet sent to your email weekly. You can choose to read them or drop them in the Pocket app and have them read to you as you go about your day. The Buy Me a Coffee link to the top preparedness articles is in the show notes. Hey everyone, and welcome back. It's been a month since I took my sabbatical, just to take some time to focus and to rest up a little bit. And so it's good to be back. I want to give a couple of shouts out and do some updates here before we jump into the episode. So first, I want to send a big shout out to Gary for the coffee on that he bought me on Buy Me a Coffee. Did that a couple of weeks ago, and I just want to say thank you so much for that, Gary. I greatly appreciate that. Whenever I see something like that come over the email and that somebody has bought me a coffee. The other thing is just to kind of continue on with our Little House in the Big Woods. Just like a recap, this last chapter that I listened to was called Summer, and this one was about cheese making. It was pretty interesting, just the way that they go about cheese making. And, you know, we go to the store, we buy our cheese, however you get it. I mean, maybe some of you make your own cheese. I guess the real thing there that a lot of people don't really consider how you make cheese, especially back in these days, is using the lining of the pig's stomach for rennet. And I thought that was really interesting. You know, Paul had a couple of pigs that he was going to, I guess that they could have slaughtered if they needed it, but they were female and he didn't want to go ahead and slaughter them just yet. So I think he winds up going to his dad's place or his uncle or cousin or brother or somebody. I can't remember who it is now. It was a couple of days ago since I listened to it, but they had a male that they slaughtered and everybody shared the rennet. And so he brings it back to Ma, and Ma uses that and boils that and uses that to make cheese. So really interesting there to do that. And, you know, you have all the necessary things that you have or you need to be able to make cheese. And you wonder, like, who was the first person to use rennet that way? You know, use the lining of a pig's stomach to be able to make cheese. You wonder how that kind of, came about. But really interesting stuff there. If you, and, you know, that's what I love about, you know, we look at our prepper fiction that we listen to or that we read, and you go back to like the Little House in the Prairie and Little House in the Big Woods in that series, and they were talking about off-grid stuff there. You can learn a lot just by reading those books, and they're children's books, but really cool stuff there. If you're interested, you can go over to audiopreps.com and look at some other books that I recommend, including Little House in the Big Woods, and you can go see some other books there that are maybe not prepper related, but that are good books that I've listened to recently. All right, the last thing before we get into the episode, I want to let you know that you can expect 2 other episodes during the week. And so I plan on, you know, this episode is usually, the main episode is usually released on Sunday evening. But you can expect 2 other ones. So maybe somewhere around Tuesday, I am going to release another one that'll be prepper related. And what these are going to be, they're videos that I'm going to extract the audio from and go ahead and use those on the podcast. And so they won't be full episodes, or at least I won't include them in the number. Like this is 778. The next one that I release on Tuesday won't be 779. But it will be a preparedness-based episode. So 770, the one that's released on Tuesday will be. And then a little bit later on in the week, probably around Thursday, I'm going to release a devotional that will have a prepper application to it. Okay. So it'll be a devotional, just a regular Bible devotional that I will share some insights on, but then also have that prepper application. So here's the thing. If you are not into that and preparedness, faith-based preparedness is not your thing, just don't download that one. I will do something in the title to set it off so you'll know that it is faith related. But I feel like I need to be doing those things, and so I just want to let you know that that is coming, and so you can expect that in the coming weeks. And I'm going to try to keep that up as much as I can, and I'm hoping that it will be a blessing to everyone out there. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the episode. So this episode is called 7 Activities to Help Prepare for the Season. And this is one that it's a solo episode as far as I'm not reading an article that I read, that I included anywhere. This is just something that I have started writing down as I was during my sabbatical, things that I was thinking about for spring, as spring is hitting us. I wrote to those that are in the top preparedness articles in the email that I sent out. I said yesterday, so Saturday, as I'm recording this on Sunday morning, Saturday was the first time I got into my truck this season that the truck was, uncomfortably hot. I'm usually cold natured. And so sometimes I get into the truck and like I can get it going and, I'm down the road and then I'll turn on the AC. This time it was like I got in my truck and like, oh, wait a minute, let me roll down the windows and let me go ahead and turn on the AC a little bit and kind of got that going before I even put it into drive because it was so warm. And I know some of you are still dealing with a lot cooler weather right now. Some of you might even have some snow on the ground still. But spring is out there and people are thinking about it. People are thinking about, better weather and kind of going from that. But with that, there's activities that we can do here that we should be thinking about for the spring. And so I wanted to share a couple of these things with you, at least 7 of them. And you might think of more that you are contemplating. But let's go ahead and jump into it. So the first one here, 7 activities to help prepare for the season, is gardening. And I think gardening is a really popular thing right now, especially when you start looking at the prices of vegetables, oh my God, and fruits right now. I go to the grocery store and it's like, man, are you kidding me? And so a lot of the times we can, but like right now, like strawberries, strawberries are starting to come into season, and you can find a lot more on the shelves when you go into the fruit and vegetable section. But the price is still crazy. I mean, compared to what has been in the past. And the other day, my wife bought some strawberries, and we started eating them, and they just tasted like junk. And I think we understand that. I mean, the quality of fruits and vegetables throughout the years have diminished. But at the same time, it's just like, you still had some that you could get out of the whole bunch that were a little sweet. But it was like the whole thing it was terrible. I was like, oh my gosh. And then it's like, do I want to spend the money? I know everything is costing more right now, but do you want to spend the money if you're not going to be sure that the fruit is going to taste good? And so people are deciding to do their own fruits and vegetables for a whole lot of reason. My neighbor last week brought in a whole bunch of soil and left, they delivered it onto their driveway. And, when I stopped to ask them, like, hey, what are y'all doing with that? I thought maybe they were backfilling, some holes or, whatever they were doing. And they're like, no, we're putting in a raised bed. And so they're gardening, And so I think a lot of people are thinking about this more and more as prices for fruits and vegetables go up. So a couple of things when we're gardening, things to think about, especially if you are brand new to the gardening, hobby or the gardening situation, is it's a learning activity. There is a learning curve. We always make fun of those big pouch, survival seed pouches, right? Or survival seed cans that you could buy. I haven't seen a lot of those recently. But those were really, really popular back in the day, and people would get them and store them, like, hey, these are in Mylar bags and, they're going to last 25 years. And people would put them in their closets like, okay, so when the zombies come, we're just going to go ahead and open that seed packet up and we're going to go ahead and have, food. Like, no, and that's not going to happen. Right. There is a learning curve to gardening. And so you need to understand that. So maybe if you are starting to garden, if you are starting to get into that, you start smaller. Maybe if you're like, I'm going to put in 5 raised beds, maybe you start with 1 raised bed and really think about where you're going to put it because of the sun and being able to water it and all that kind of stuff. Start out with 1 and see how where you go from there. The other thing that I would just highly suggest is start a journal for what works well. Like, hey, I started my seed at this time, or I planted at this time. I'm watering my tomatoes, or I'm watering whatever I'm doing. This amount of time, and go ahead and take a little bit of a journal. Write some things down, because you don't remember from season to season what worked well and what didn't work well. And again, it's a learning curve. So, having a journal that you can go back and say, okay, man, those tomatoes that I put in this section of the garden really worked well. And then you can go ahead and jot that kind of stuff down so you remember it for next season. The thing is, if you start struggling for time, and that was always my thing, as busy as I am, going out there and watering. Sometimes I was watering like at 9 o'clock at night. I would have the lights on in the backyard, and like I'm watering and doing things like that. One of the things you can do is put in a soaker hose and then put it on a timer. And that way you don't have to worry about always being out there and watering, or if you're running out of time, you can go out there, and maybe what you do when you do go out there, you're inspecting, making sure insects aren't getting to things. You can pull some weeds if you have to pull some weeds, but that might be something that would relieve a lot of time for you, is putting in a soaker hose and putting in a timer. And again, the thing is, start small. And even if you can't garden right now with a raised bed, maybe maybe you don't have time. Maybe you do have a backyard, but you don't have time. Maybe you live in an apartment or a townhome or something along those lines. Start off with just 1. Do a container garden with maybe 1 or 2 different plants, and you can easily go to one of the big box stores, Home Depot, Lowe's. They sell tomato plants that are already really kind of going. Sometimes you even see little tomatoes on there. And so go ahead and grab those, just so that you can get some experience and realize that there's such a big difference in the taste and things like that. So I would greatly encourage you to take a little bit of time to garden and do some, even if it's just an herb garden where you're growing some of those types of things, or you are putting things in the ground that you have used, like onions. We have done that before, where we have used green onions, and then the last little bit of it, we'll put it in the dirt. And sometimes you like, especially if you have like a soaker hose going on, you put it in the dirt, kind of leave it there. It's like, man, it starts to grow. And we use onions a lot, so that you can have your own little patch of onions, and it doesn't take up a lot of room, but it's like you're just using what you have from the extras from your kitchen, right? I can talk here. And I'm actually remembering that I put in a article in the top preparedness articles about reusing kitchen scraps, right? And so there's a bunch of different kitchen scraps that you can reuse in the garden. Replant them. You start them off with a little bit of water, on your kitchen seal, window seal, and put them out there in the garden. I think that would work really well. And so you get a little bit of a taste of gardening just by doing that. So gardening is number 1. The next thing that I want to suggest, another activity to prepare for, are blackouts. And I've really focused a lot on this because we've experienced it here in Texas and in the Houston area. And even before, like, we had our big winter storm, we would have rolling blackouts where the lights would go out and things would, you just kind of had to deal with it for maybe an hour or 2 hours. And the thing is that it's only getting worse. And we're not the only state that is experiencing this. Other people are experiencing this. And the fact is that our infrastructure is really, really old. They're not doing a whole lot to the upkeep on that. Then you have all that, and it's kind of died down, at least I haven't heard of it recently, is people attacking substations. And maybe they'll start that up. I mean, it was like in the middle of winter, people are attacking, electrical substations, and people are losing power in the middle of winter. Maybe they're going to wait for the middle of summer when it's really hot and people start attacking substations again. So, people have that effect, it's like a pain, and people hate that. So the thing is that, our infrastructure is old. It's not protected really well. And when the power goes out, there could be a lot of things that could wind up you losing. And yeah, you could lose your stuff in your refrigerator and the stuff in your freezer. You could lose, people have lost their lives because of the heat. And so you want to make sure that you have a way to mitigate the issues that you're going to have from a blackout. So extreme heat will have many using their ACs during the summertime. That's what I'm saying right now, as it's the springtime, go ahead and start preparing so that you're ready for summertime. But extreme heat will have many using their ACs, and that can strain the grid, along with the terrorism, along with the grid being taxed, along with people attacking the grid, and all those different kinds of things. So you want to have multiple power options. I know a lot of people, especially after the winter storms that we've had down here, people have talked about whole house generators, like a Generac, and those are great. I mean, if you have money coming out of your ears, go ahead and go for it. But for what I understand of how much they cost, and then when you're running it, like I know people who had neighbors who had one of these during the winter storm when the power was out for the whole week, and they had a huge bill. Because, they were running their whole house on gas. They had a whole crazy bill. And our gas down here is not as much as you guys up north have it. But, that's one of those things to consider. The other thing is like, instead of having a whole house generator, maybe you have just a regular generator that can power a lot of the things in your home. Some people, tie that into their home electrical grid. And some people just like, hey, I'm just going to run this, from the backyard and string, electrical cords, power cords through the house and power the things that I really need. The thing is that if you have a generator, you can buy a big enough generator to power like your freezer and your refrigerator, to power up the things, your phones and things that your tablets, your computers, and then also maybe even run an AC unit if you have, if it's really extremely hot, because here in Houston, we get to triple digits in the summertime, and it can get really, really hot, and the feels like temperature is even worse than that. And so maybe a generator with having a little window AC unit where you can kind of like close off the rest of the house, and you just stay in one home or one room to kind of keep it cool. And that's especially if you have someone who is older who needs that, to be able to stay cool. If you don't go with the generator, maybe a generator is, outside of your means right now. Maybe you go with an inverter. You can buy a decent inverter. The one that I've used and I have it in pictures is from Harbor Freight, and the sucker still works. It's like, it's gosh, how old is it now? It's like 6 or 7 years old, and it still works. And I know a lot of the times people, crap all over Harbor Freight. It's like, their stuff is really cheap, and some of it is, but this inverter has worked. And so you want to get a big enough inverter that can, connect it to your vehicle. Your vehicle can hold a lot of, gallons of gasoline. And then you run that inverter, and you're able to power your freezer, and you're able to power your refrigerator, and maybe even charge up, your phone and stuff like that. In a situation like that, you don't want to lose hundreds and hundreds of dollars of frozen food or stuff in your refrigerator. It can be very, very expensive. So if you can run an inverter to be able to keep that, and you don't have to keep it going for a long time. You can keep it going for like an hour, 2 hours, and it can keep things really, really cold. The thing about a freezer or refrigerator, you need to have enough power in the inverter. It needs to have like a maximum surge capacity to be able to kick off the compressor, and then it just comes back down. Now the new freezers, we have a new freezer that runs on the Jackery, the little power station that I have. And I've talked about Jackery, and I've talked about, others as well. And I've actually become an affiliate for some of the other ones as well, because I think they're so valuable, right? You can charge them with solar and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, I know that I've run my freezer off of the Jackery, and I ran it for hours, and it didn't, it just needed to be able to kick the compressor on, and then it didn't eat up a lot of the battery. And so, have one of those small units if that's something that you can do to be able to power the things that you need. And then lastly, if you're needing, other little power and means of power, those portable, I've been preaching that for such a long time, is the little portable power banks that you can, put in your backpack, that you can, I have like a ton of them that I've received them from people. Now people are like giving them away, and decent sizes. I got one last year at the very beginning of the school year, and it was a 20,000 milliamp one that they were just like, hey, back to school type thing. And I'm like, all right, cool. And I use that in my backpack. I keep that charged up, and I use that to charge my phone, and if I need to, and I'll always have plenty of battery. But you can power all different kinds of things. You can power a little fan, you can power lights, you can charge up, your flashlights if you have a USB flashlight that needs to be charged from there. You can do a bunch of different things with those little USB portable battery banks. And then of course, candles, all that kind of stuff. Those are important. The thing is like, you want to have light. You want to have, you want to have power to be able to save your freezers and your refrigerators. You want to be able to charge up your phone so that you can still get information, and talk to people and do all that kind of stuff. And you want to have a way to stay cool if you need to do that. And so you can do that really, really easily. But if you don't have those things now, you want to go ahead and start preparing for. The third thing is vehicle preparedness. So as we're moving into spring, think about your vehicle. And so I'm really thinking about those of you who live up north, where they throw a lot of salt down on the roads to be able to, deal with the ice and stuff like that. You want to go ahead and take care of that salt under your vehicle, because if you just leave it there, it's going to cause a lot of rust. Or let's just say that you're from the south, but you took a trip up north and you rode on or you drove, again, I can talk, you drove on roads that were really salted, and you're just not really thinking about it. You want to come back, and now you want to make sure that you rinse all that stuff off so that you're not dealing with that salt that's just left in there and just starts to rust and corrode and your vehicle. So, you want to deal with that. But then besides that, looking at your tires. When was the last time you looked at your spare tire? If your vehicle, nowadays, there's so many vehicles that like don't even have spare tires. I'm like, what the heck is that? But look at your tires and see if they're full, if they haven't deflated, right? You want to make sure that you have that. Make sure that you have, I bought my truck, I bought it used, and I never had to really check it out until I finally, I'm like, I want to make sure that I was doing this type of thing, right? It was like, I'm going to go make sure I have all the necessities. And I didn't have a jack for whatever reason. I did not have a jack. I had all the other things. So I'm like, man, if I have a flat tire, I'm not going to be able to jack up my truck to be able to change it if I'm somewhere where I just, can't drive to a service station or whatever. And of course I have Fix-A-Flat and all that kind of stuff in my vehicle, which I have used before. I've talked about that and even did an article on that. But I didn't have the jack. So I went and I purchased the one that I should have had for my vehicle, and I have it now. So make sure that your tires are good. Check your fluids. Make sure that your oil is good. Make sure all the other fluids are good. It's always good to be able to do that. And then preventative maintenance right now. I think doing a little bit of preventative maintenance will really serve you well, especially with the way the cost of everything going up. And I know of people, and I've mentioned this before on the podcast, that have gone to the car repair shop and their car's been in there for a couple of weeks, maybe even longer, because they couldn't get the parts in. So they're either carpooling or they're using Uber or whatever they're doing because they don't have a vehicle that is working because they're waiting for parts. So if you can do a little bit of preventive maintenance now, instead of waiting for your vehicle to break down, that's going to save you money. And it's also going to save you a lot of heartache if it breaks down and you're not able to get parts. So let's take care of the things that we have with, in our vehicles, vehicle preparedness. I think that's a really big deal, and make sure that your vehicle is in good shape. All right, the fourth thing to consider when we're getting ready for spring is this is the fun stuff, right? This is, maybe upping your bushcraft and your outdoor skills. Camping would be the first thing on my list. And when we think about camping down here, I know some of you up north, y'all camp whenever, you have all different, whatever. Y'all just go camping, you're good. Down here, it's like, we camp like in the wintertime, and at least if you're not crazy, wintertime, and then in the spring, right? The fall. We don't go in the summer. And now, when I was a Boy Scout, we went in the summertime, and it was crazy hot, but I was a kid. I could deal with it back then. There's just like going camping in the middle of summer, July and August down here in Texas. It's just like only the most avid campers do that. But in the spring, that's the perfect time to camp. It's still cool. It's still nice. You can wake up and you're not drenching in sweat and all that good stuff. So camping would be a great activity right now. Maybe even camping in the backyard with the kids, having something like that going down, and then just be able to do some outdoor skills like build a fire, like teaching your kids how to build a fire and do that. I finally caught up on Mick Rowland's podcast here recently. I took a couple of trips in this month, and I was in the truck for a while, and I was able to catch up. And there's a kid in there whose dad was a prepper. Maybe we'll probably talk about this in a future episode roundtable. There's a kid in there whose dad was a prepper, but the mom wasn't really on board with it. And he had all the equipment in his bag. Dad built bug out bags for everyone, but he didn't know how to build a fire. They didn't know what to do with it. So teaching your kids how to build a fire, and having that skill, I think it's a great skill to have. Maybe it's time to go fishing, and you take your kids fishing, or you go fishing, and you're able to do a little bit of that. Maybe you do. You put your lines in the water like you would normally fish, and maybe you try some primitive fishing as well, and trying some of that to see if if I had just basic fishing line, and I had a 12-ounce aluminum can, could I get some fish? Could I get something here? Maybe hiking. Hiking is a thing for that people like to do. Maybe you put on a backpack and see how much weight you can carry and see how far you can go, and just getting out there in nature, but maybe breaking in some new hiking boots and taking time to be able to do that, and just going out and enjoying nature. That would be something that you could do to up your bushcraft and outdoor skills during the spring. And then the last one here, and I think this is it's a fun one, but it's a good one to think about, is outdoor cooking. Cooking outdoors, whether that is taking a little bit of time to use the burner on the barbecue pit, or barbecuing, doing more barbecuing, doing that. If you have a fire pit, cooking over the fire pit. If you have a camping stove, using that just, in the backyard to get some, using that and getting that going. To maybe you've done the prepper thing where you've purchased a camping stove, or you've done something like that and you've never used it, and go ahead and break it out and see what it's like to cook. When we get into the real heat of summer, a lot of the times you don't want to cook in, use your oven. You don't want to use your stove, because that adds to the heat of the home. So let's just say we do have a blackout. You don't want to be cooking inside the home, because it's going to add to the heat there. So you would cook outdoors. And so that, you have all this stuff kind of going on, and you have a little bit of experience with it already. So now's the time to be able to do that. So starting to cook outdoors as the weather is still a little bit cool out there, and you can test out new gear and things like that. So maybe cooking is one of those outdoor skills that you can put into effect. So number 5 is going to be to freshen up your organization. We hear the term spring cleaning, and a lot of people do that. I mean, that's like, stuck into our brain, and you might be doing a lot of spring cleaning. I mean, we're doing some of that in our home right now. But along with that spring cleaning could be like freshening up your organization. So going to your food pantry and making sure that your food pantry stays organized. You might be very organized. You might have kids or a spouse who just gets in there and messes things up. And so like you're going in there and like, okay, I'm going to organize everything to make sure I know where everything is and everything is in its proper place. So, maybe you reorganize your food pantry. Maybe you look at your first aid kits and your first aid. I just did a video on that, and you'll hear a little bit more about that maybe in this next week. But your first aid kits, and maybe you go see what's actually there. A lot of the times we have first aid kits or maybe even first aid closets. I remember my friend Linda Loosely from Food Storage Moms who talks about she has a first aid closet, right? Not just a kit, a closet. And so maybe you have a first aid closet where you have a bunch of supplies in there. But the thing with first aid kits and first aid closets or medicine cabinets, whatever you might have, is people go in there and use it, and they don't tell. It's like, hey, I use this bandage, or I use this medicine, or I use whatever. And so a lot of the times you go and you think you have stuff, and you wind up not having it. So going in there and organizing it, maybe doing a little bit of an inventory would be smart to do. Look at your first aid and see where you're at. Another thing is a gear inventory. We really don't want to be the type of people that buy stuff and throw it into a closet. I know a lot of people do that. I know that I've done that before. I know that that's something that's like, hey, you see something like that would be really great to have, and you do that, but then you go look for it and you don't know where it's at. So doing a little bit of an inventory on your gear, maybe even pulling out your bug out bag or your get home bag and looking at what you have there would be smart to do. So doing a little bit of a gear inventory and seeing what you have, maybe even taking some time to jot things down. It's like, hey, in the category of fire, I have this. In the category of water purification, I have this, and in the communications, I have this. And so you're able to do a little bit of that so that you know what you have. And then it's a lot easier to go off of that list than to go to a closet or go to a bag or, go looking all over the house, wherever you stash things, to try to find things. All right, so maybe you freshen up your organization by doing a gear inventory. And then lastly, your emergency binder. I think if you haven't done an emergency binder, I think everyone needs to do that. There are free templates I know that I have done. You can come over to the website, Ready Your Future, do a search for emergency binder. And I know that I have linked to many different templates that are out there that you can print out to have your emergency binder and create your emergency binder. I know that I've done videos on YouTube about emergency binders. And so you can, you have a lot of knowledge out there, but the thing is like knowing what to do and then actually doing it is the hard thing. And so creating an emergency binder, if you haven't done that, is really big. And then if you have done that, maybe you go do an audit. It's like, okay, are there some old account numbers in here? Are there old passwords? Do I need to update any of the medical information? Do I need to switch anything out? Bank accounts or anything like that. And so you're able to go ahead and take care of that so that you have a strong emergency binder that has everything you need. And so you're not kicking yourself later on down the road for not updating it. So that's something that you can do right now as we're getting ready for spring, is to update your emergency binder and as you freshen up all your organization. Number 6, or another activity that you can do as we're moving into spring, is revisit your emergency plan. And so that's a lot goes into that. But, if you have a bug out plan, maybe you need to revisit it. Maybe things have changed. Maybe, the person that you were going to go, stay at their home out in the country, maybe they're not there anymore. Maybe you need to touch base with them if it's somebody that you haven't talked to in a while. Maybe you need to just look at the whole situation. Have people moved? Have your kids moved out of the house? Are they very familiar with what, needs to happen? Revisit your bug out plan. Maybe you need to revisit your bug in plan, and maybe things have changed there. Look at your police numbers. Do you have the police numbers, updated police numbers close by? Do you have updated hospital numbers and your doctor and all those different kinds of things? Are those updated so that you can easily, call those people if you need to? And then what about an emergency family meetup? Letting your family know, like, hey, if there is an emergency, let's just say there's a fire in the home and everybody gets out their window, or people go out the back door, people go out the garage, people go out the front door, whatever. It's like, hey, we're going to meet. Everybody is going to get out and meet over here, in the next door neighbor's house, or we're going to meet at the corner, and we want to make sure everybody is there. And that's how we know everybody is safe. If you don't show up there, we know that you're not safe, and then we're going back after you, or whatever that might be. So that might be for like a fire. But what if there was another emergency? What if there was like a tornado in your city, or there was I don't know, like a big storm, a flood, just kind of crazy flood that just happened out of nowhere. What kind, or maybe there was a terrorism, whatever, a terrorism attack in the city. What kind of emergency family meetup do you have? A communication plan. It's like, hey, we're going to meet up here. And maybe it's home. Maybe it's at a family member's house outside of the city. Maybe, it's, going out to the country, whatever it might be, is like have that emergency family meetup and that communication plan that everybody knows. If you have kids in school, like what are they supposed to do? How is that going to work? Maybe a lot of the times, we can if you work from home, you work in the city, and then you have kids that go to school, and maybe they go to an aftercare program or something like that, after school care program. Sometimes they will let you let a neighbor pick them up, right? So it's like, hey, I will allow my neighbor to pick these people up if there's an emergency, and you can, do an official letter, get it notarized, put it in their file. And a lot of the times, because it's computerized, they will put it on there, can pick up in case of an emergency. And so what you can do that as well. So have an emergency family meetup plan so that, if something happens, especially with how crazy our world is right now, that people, that you're not trying to figure out, what's going on. You're not trying to call people when the phone lines are down and busy, and, you feel a little bit more confident that people are going to be safe. All right. And then the last thing here as we move into spring is to do a home check. And what I mean by this is walk around your home to see if there are any issues that you need to take care of. I want to give you an example here. My brother had a bathroom remodeled, and they did a really great job, really beautiful, remodel and all that kind of stuff. But one of the guys, for whatever reason, put a screw into the hardy plank that drilled into a pipe. And so it created a little leak, but it was a small leak that dripped. And over time, it dripped, and it was the pipe was on an outside wall. And so one day, my brother's outside cutting the grass, and it's probably like a week after the job was done, and there was no issues inside the house, but outside the house, when he's cutting the grass, he had a big patch that was wet. He's like, okay, it hasn't rained. Well, I've got a leak somewhere. And so, doing a little bit of investigation is like, hey, this is where the remodel was. And they finally figured out that this guy had put a hole. And it was a big fight. But if he wasn't out there doing, looking at the home and cutting the grass and doing that kind of stuff, he would have never seen it, or it would have gone for a lot longer time, and maybe more damage would have been done. So, you want to go ahead and do that. So maybe you, especially coming out of winter time, is, walking around the house. Is there any wood that needs to be replaced? Are there any, vents that need to, we have, on the side of our house, and we have a big tree, and we have little animals that like to try to get into our attic. And so I've had to replace those little soffits, right? The things, the vents that allow air to kind of circulate in the attic. At least we have those down here in the South. I don't know if everybody has them everywhere, but I've had to replace those with more sturdy grates, because these guys, they're able to just pull off that stuff that's there. And so, going around, and I've noticed, now that I check my home every once in a while, I notice when they've done that. Now I've replaced pretty pretty much all of them, so they're never going to get in now. But walking around, I could see like, hey, it looks like they're trying to work on this one here, so I'm going to go ahead and replace that one. Are there, walk your fence. Are there any holes in your fence that need to be replaced? Do you have dogs, or is somebody, somebody else's dog getting into your, can they get into your backyard and maybe mess up your garden or whatever that might be? Is there anything that looks out of place as you walk around your home and you're just kind of inspecting it? And maybe you see a bunch of beehives or wasp nests or whatever it might be. And so you're able to deal with it before it gets out of hand. A lot of the times we don't do that. We don't walk around our homes on a regular basis, especially like if you have a side that there's nothing over there. Really, it's just kind of like, somebody cuts the grass for you and it's there, and you really don't pay attention to it. So go see if anything looks out of place. Remove items that might allow someone to use against you, like a ladder. We talk about this when we talk about security. It's like, somebody that uses a ladder to get up to the second story, part of your home and gets to a second story window. A lot of the times you might think, hey, this is on the second story, I'm not locking my window, or a kid might not lock their window. But if they're able to get to that second story, well, they have easy access into your home. So removing some of those things that give people easy access, or things that people can use against you, look for any other security concerns that might be, around your home. And then lastly, check your smoke alarms, your CO2 alarms, if you have gas. That's one of those things that I think everybody should do. Now, a lot of the times they'll tell you to do that during daylight savings time, and we just recently went through that here. And so maybe that's a thing that you do, is like, hey, you've already done it, but if you don't have a regular cadence on that, then go ahead and take this time to check your smoke alarms and check your CO2 alarms and make sure those batteries, change those batteries out. It's worth it to spend $5 for a 9-volt battery to make sure that your fire alarm is working well. I've read many articles throughout the years where people died because the smoke alarm battery wasn't replaced, and that's just like, that's not something that you ever want to hear and deal with. So go ahead and do that, but do a home check. So just a quick little recap here as we're ending this one is like, as we move into spring, 7 activities that you should consider to prepare for the season is maybe you want to garden. Take care of some gardening needs. Start small. Prepare for a blackout. Or for blackouts. Our grid is it's getting old, and there's so many ways that you can attack it. I think it's just smart to be able to do that and mitigate your, a situation where people are just miserable, being around the house with this blackout, and with the lights not being on. Check your vehicle, do some vehicle preparedness, do some preventative maintenance, make sure things are good there. Take a little bit of time before it gets super, super hot to up your bushcraft and outdoor skills, camping, building a fire, fishing, hiking, even cooking outdoors. Take some time to do some inventory, freshen up your organization, your food pantry, first aid, gear, emergency binder. That's a big one right there that pays off big dividends later on down the road if you ever need it. And then revisit your emergency plan. Make sure that you have good numbers, make sure that your family knows where to meet up if they need to for the different kinds of situations, and do that family home check. Go around your home, the outside of the home. Maybe you go inside your home as well. Maybe there are rooms that you have, like guest rooms and things like that you don't go in on a regular basis. Just do a little check. I think that's important. You never know when a pipe is going to bust. You never know when animals are going to get in there, pests are going to be in there. And so that if you're a little bit more proactive, you can remedy that stuff pretty quickly. So 7 activities that we can do as we're getting into spring. Well, everyone, that is it for episode 778. I hope it was a blessing for you. If you found this episode valuable, I would appreciate a review wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you haven't subscribed, make sure you click the subscribe button in your favorite podcast app. That way you never miss another episode of Sweet Prepper Goodness. And lastly, don't forget to join the email list. When you do, I'm going to send you my blackout checklist, which we just talked about blackouts here. I'm going to give you a blackout checklist to know what you should do before, during, and after the lights go out. And with that, choose to live a more self-reliant life. Choose not to be so dependent on the government, grid, or the grind. Until next time, live with no regrets and stay prepped and aware. Peace.